Salutations. I would like to begin by stating that I have no formal education on the topics discussed here, and that to refer to my videos in an academic context would be a terrible idea. My purpose in making these videos is to give a concise summary of Neoplatonic metaphysics in an easy-to-grasp manner, to encourage viewers to think more about the world around them, and to help to dispose of certain stupid opinions. So, what is metaphysics, and why does it matter?
How do I put this basically enough? It's a philosophical theory, the kind you might encounter if you took time to read some books.
Metaphysics is the study of the foundational principles of existence. To put it in the simplest terms possible, it can be said to be the inquiry into what exists and what it is like. When you put it like this, it's easy to see why this subject is not only very important, but possibly the most important subject anyone could ever think about. After all, if something you think exists actually doesn't, then you're wasting your time engaging with it. On the other hand, if something is affecting you and you don't even think it exists, then you can't do anything about it. Metaphysical inquiry allows us to consider ideas about reality, consciousness, experience, and meaning, as well as questions regarding religion and the paranormal. When we have conclusions on matters like these, we can begin to understand our own nature, who and what we really are, and then question our actions.
Oh, he's waxing philosophical.
So, what's Neoplatonism? It's a metaphysical model and a body of philosophy that represents the culmination of over 1,000 years' worth of continuous intellectual tradition, beginning with the earliest Greek philosophers in the 6th century BC, and lasting until around 529 AD, when Emperor Justinian closed the Platonic Academy as part of his persecutions of pagans. Platonic metaphysics continued to be important long after that, however, because Catholic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and Augustine of Hippo took a lot of influence from these classical traditions, and much of their work is still impacting modern thinkers today, including political thinkers, physicists, and mathematicians. The most important person in this tradition was Plato, after whom Platonism is named. His ideas were so potent that pretty much every philosopher that's lived since has been directly or indirectly responding to him in some fashion.
Oh, philosophy-wise, he's up there with the greats. Aristotle, Plato, Confucius, meth head down my street that forgot how to speak English from too much meth.
It's this tradition of ideas that I'm going to be explaining and defending here. Excuse me, you might object. Why would anyone care what a bunch of ancient Greeks said? They were superstitious savages who didn't know anything about science.
So, how many of him do you think it would take to screw in a light bulb? All of them.
The Greek philosopher Eratosthenes calculated the exact size and shape of the Earth using 2 sticks and his own mathematical and geometric knowledge. His measurement was the most accurate ever recorded before the invention of modern technologies like lasers and satellites. Empedocles invented a theory of evolution by natural selection. He posited that animals mutated and were born with random features that would pass on to the next generation if they were beneficial to survival, or die off if they were a hindrance. Another version of this theory by Charles Darwin is the basis of the entire modern field of biology. Pythagoras is credited with geometric insights that are taught in schools to this day. Leucippus and Democritus theorized the existence of atoms thousands of years before microscopes revealed their existence. Ancient Greek engineers built metal statues that would move by mechanical means, powered by falling water and gears. They built clockwork computers like the Antikythera mechanism, which could track the movements of the stars. Ctesibius invented machines for pumping jets of compressed air and water. He also invented a clock which remained the most accurate in the world for nearly 2,000 years. Heron of Alexandria invented a steam engine, a vending machine, a syringe, and a programmable self-steering wagon. He also improved Ctesibius's water pumps so that they could be used on fire engines. Archimedes is said to have designed machines that were used to damage Roman warships.
Alexander the Great was in between there. You don't have to know. Do you even know what Macedonia is? You fucking losers.
The ancient Greek and Roman philosophers were able to do all of these things without any of the stuff modern scientists and engineers rely on. No computer systems, no calculators, none of the benefits of having thousands of years of scientific progress already established.
Divide by 10 in minutes. Add up to 3 columns in an hour.
These things were achieved using simple, primitive tools and their own intellects. So take a listen to the fruits of this intellect and you just might learn something.
You simple-minded freak.
Now, with all that out of the way, I would like to start off by asking you to consider a question. What exists? Seriously, I'd like you to think for a minute about what things you believe do and don't exist. My good sir, I hear you say, I have eyes and ears, I can see and hear that which exists. On the contrary, our senses are not reliable sources of information at all. Modern technology has increasingly demonstrated how easy it is to fool the senses, but this is by no means a new revelation. Have you ever seen a mirage? Have you ever looked at an optical illusion? Have you ever been walking in a crowded place and thought you heard someone say your name? Have you ever felt an itch like a bug was walking on you, but there was nothing there? Our senses were not designed from the ground up to reveal the objective truth of the universe for us. They evolved over millions of years by providing a survival advantage to our ancestors.
Showing the progression of the prehistoric creatures from the jellyfish to the dinosaur to primitive man.
It's a very simple 3-step evolution.
Sounds all right.
That's all they do, help us to stay alive long enough to reproduce. Take a look at the nearest object. Can you see the atoms, the electrons, the quantum fluctuations? Can you see the particles of air between your eyes and the object? No, because none of these things would present a direct benefit for your survival. You cannot see the truth of what is right in front of you by relying only on your senses. When we also take into account the existence of dreams, delusions, hallucinations, mass hysteria, and other such phenomena, we can only come to the conclusion that our perceptions are a complete mess when it comes to figuring out the truth. Now, hold it right there, my good gentleman, you may object. We can use reason and logic to deduce from our senses the real from the illusory. If reason, or rationality, is just an emergent property of the evolution of the brain, then it is impossible to use reason to understand anything. Reason is, under this paradigm, a tool for altering a creature's behaviour in ways that are more beneficial to survival and reproduction. If a certain behaviour is beneficial, reason will lead to it regardless of its truth or objectivity, and we will perceive it to be correct and logical even if it is not. In addition, due to the differences in individual brains, each individual creature has its own form of reason, which is unique to itself and therefore fundamentally incompatible with that of another. The assumption that logic and reason can be used to discern the truth presupposes that they represent or interact with a universal principle that transcends the material universe, and therefore that materialism is false. The solution that presents itself to the realist is that the reason employed by creatures participates in the changeless, immaterial universal we call logic, and is rational to the extent that it does so. If such a universal exists, it is certainly beneficial for a creature to participate in it, and therefore creatures may evolve to do so to differing degrees. Furthermore, materialists constantly demand material evidence for immaterial things, presupposing without any good reason not only that material evidence is even valid in the first place, but that it is the only valid way of establishing anything.
It's the other way around.
The materialist uses material evidence to substantiate the claim that material evidence substantiates claims. This is just nonsensical circular reasoning, and it also contradicts the materialist's acceptance of things like mathematical proofs that are, by definition, immaterial and have no physical evidence for their validity. This is an atrocious double standard. Still not convinced? Let's consider the problem of universals. Universals are properties that multiple entities can share. Material objects that are not physically connected by anything can have a sympathetic correspondence, and the medium of this correspondence is not dependent on any particular object. Imagine two squares. One is large, drawn in chalk on a chalkboard, and the other is small, made with red paint on a piece of paper. Despite being in different places, being made of different materials, and being different sizes and colours, both of them are squares. They are squares because they are geometric shapes consisting of 4 lines of equal length. Let's call this set of properties squareness. While our 2 squares are particulars, squareness itself is a universal. Multiple objects can be squares at the same time, and if we destroyed every single square thing in the world, squareness would still exist. New squares could be made, and they would share the same properties in the same ways. There is no physical mechanism that connects all square things, nor is there one that connects red things, tall things, female things, chair-shaped things, or solid things. So where are these universals located? Obviously not in the material world. My good fellow, these things aren't real at all, I hear you say indignantly. They are created in the mind and exist only there. What you've just described is called nominalism. The astute viewer has already spotted the inherent absurdity of the position, since it implies that if humans didn't exist, then squares wouldn't exist either. As if our 2 squares no longer share their squareness when not being observed. We could build a robot and program it to look for squares and take pictures of them. If all humans suddenly died, the robot could still go around and do its job.
What the hell is that?
Since the properties of squares are things the robot's cameras and software can detect. How can a robot recognize these universal properties if they are imaginary?
But you're not smart.
Well, I just test well.
Even if we accept that squareness somehow exists entirely in the brain of the observer, nominalism doesn't actually solve the problem of universals at all. It doesn't even come close. All it does is push back the problem by 1 step. Your brain has no actual connection to any of the objects you think about. The correspondence between your thoughts and the world around you is a sympathetic one. This raises the question of what agency generates the connection within the mind when it is presented with things of a similar shape. Neutral monism, the belief that there is a fundamental element that is neither material nor ideal but changes into one or the other under different circumstances, also fails to account for the existence of universals because it insists on the malleability of the fundamental element, whereas universals are unchangeable by their very nature and must be ideal insofar as anything can be said to be.
I get it.
I don't get it.
Another example of universals is numbers. They don't change. 2 plus 2 is always 4 and can't ever be anything else.
2 plus 2 equals 4. Ha ha! It's insane! He's crazy!
Numbers also don't depend on material particulars. If we destroyed everything in the world that comes in 4s, that wouldn't destroy the number 4. If you added 2 plus 2 again, you'd still get 4. The number 4 is completely unaffected by anything that happens within the material universe, and exists outside of our understanding of it. We can see from all this that there exists a range of abstract principles and forms that are immaterial, unchanging, and do not belong to any particular time or place within the universe. Using Occam's razor, we can also assign qualia and aboutness to this stratum of universal forms, and we can presume that there are a plethora of other forms that we simply don't know about. What's more, the reality of some of these universals seems to be a precondition for the material world to even exist in the first place. And from this we can deduce that, ontologically speaking, universals precede matter, and that the physical reality we experience depends on universals. The laws of physics require mathematical principles and logical absolutes to apply in order to function, for example. Now that we've dispensed with our preconceived assumptions about reality and established the existence of the ideal, in the next video I'll be handling the first most basic principles from which we construct the Neoplatonic model. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.